behind me, and you all can see there are multiple exits if anybody needs to leave in a hurry. We do want to thank New Song Church for sharing their facility with us. Oh, there's locked doors getting unlocked. Also, just a reminder again that the sign-in sheet is at the table at the back of the room, and there's also a sign-up sheet for folks who are interested in giving public comment, which will start at about 6:10. At that time, I will ask for folks on the phone if anybody wants to give public comment from the phone, so that will be available to you as well. So just real quick, going over the agenda before we get going, the first thing that we're going to do is an approval of the meeting minutes, followed by public comment, and then the real meat of the meeting is discussion around nomination of the next 4 committee members, followed by an update from June Reyes on our outreach and engagement activities, some committee member comments, and then we should be able to adjourn at 7:30. So I'd like to just start by having folks in the room and on the phone. We'll start in the room, do an introduction, just give your name and your affiliation, and if you know that you are one of the applicants that's being considered for appointment, if you could just indicate that as well. And if we could start with the committee members, and then we'll just move to the staff table, and then the roving mic.
Michael Edenhill.
Maria Sippen.
Megan Horst.
Robin Wang.
Shanice Brittany Clark.
And James Valdez.
Katie Lister.
And Sam Rosso with PCEF staff. And is wireless on? All right, we'll go ahead and pass this around.
My name is Paul Curler. I'm a citizen, and I am one of the applicants for the position.
Oh, here.
Let's see if I can break as many arms as possible. I'm Tracy Farwell, retired engineer, not an applicant. I do have a comment or two when it's time.
Michael Human, a citizen. Alan Ippolito, I work for an organization named Verde. I am not an applicant.
Jay Ward with Energy Trust of Oregon.
Andrea Johnson, I'm the Executive Director at Green Empowerment, and I am one of the applicants for the Granting Committee today.
Alex Johnson, citizen.
Jenny Hall, Energy Trust of Oregon.
Ben D'Antoni, I'm a citizen. I just wanted to say it's really moving that there are no white cis men on that panel.
Virginia Wiseman, I'm a volunteer with 350 PDX Northeast team.
Jeff Mullen Jr., I'm with Raymore Construction. I'm an applicant for the position.
Jeff Mullen, senior contractor.
June Reyes, PCEF staff member. And Open Signal folks, y'all want to just introduce yourselves?
I'm Mike.
Tony, Open Signal. All right, thank you all. And then we'll go to the phone, just a moment.
Yep, James has to run back to the computer before folks on the phone can go. All right, so I think we have just a few folks on the phone, so if you know that your first name is near the beginning of the alphabet, maybe just we'll start there.
Okay.
Or we can...
Unmuting. Okay, the phone should be unmuted.
James Matuire, Vice President of the Home Performance Guild of Oregon.
Thanks, James.
Thank you.
Do we have one more person on the line? Okay.
That's fine too.
Yep, I think that we can move on. If you want to, I think that we need to advance a couple of slides, so we're going to be on slide number 4 now, or slide number, we're going to go back to slide number 3 and just say for the public, that these are just the sort of basic guidelines for public participation. We are about to enter into the public comment period. We would ask that folks limit their comments to about 2.5 minutes. We're going to invite you to give your public comments up here at the table, and I'll set a timer on my phone, and when it looks like you have about 30 seconds left, I'll just try and do something not very rude seeming, but that you will notice so that you know to wrap it up. Does anyone on the phone wish to give public comment?
Oh, just a moment. Let me.
Nope, you're
unmute
muted.
Again. Okay, the phone is unmuted.
James, are you interested in giving public comment on the phone?
Not at this time.
Okay, great. So then I just need to grab the list. Okay, so if we can start, I'd like to ask Jeffrey Moreland to come up.
How's everyone doing? Hi, my name is Jeff Moreland Jr., and I am a contractor with Raymore Construction. A little background, I graduated from Portland State in 2014, so I am a millennial, and I'm actually one of the applicants that applied for this position. And one of the reasons that I think that it's important, because I think I bring a different perspective, because I am of the next generation coming up, and also I am a contractor. And one of the things that I think I bring to the table is that I've been in the contracting business for the last 6-7 years. I'm second generation with construction, and I know a lot of the pitfalls and some of the loopholes and things that have traditionally been exploited, for things of this nature. These kind of committees, that a lot of people say a lot of the things that they think you want to hear, and then don't actually execute. So I believe I'm one of the people that could potentially help identify those kind of situations. Raymore's been around for the last 20 years. Like I said, I've grown up in it, so I'm very well versed in construction language, and a lot of the things that you find in construction, I've experienced. So, thank you for your time. And again, any questions?
If we could actually, unmuted myself. Maybe we can, if the committee wouldn't mind, if there are questions, maybe we can ask you to come back up after the public comment period. That's okay?
No problem.
All right, great.
All right, thank you.
So can I have Tracy Farwell? If that's correct, I apologize if I mispronounce your name.
And I can come to you if this is.
Am I going to sit in Sam's chair?
You are.
Or you're welcome to sit here.
It's too late. I'm on
Okay.
the move. I have a prop.
Oh.
Well, thank you so much to PCEF for being so organized and making this look like it's a professional project. In my career, I did work on $50 to $70 million projects. There are some expectations for a project that size. This is really looking good, the way you're doing this. Specifically, tonight, I'd like to bring to your attention a New York bestseller, Draw Down the Most Comprehensive Plan Ever Proposed for to Reduce Global Warming, Paul Hawken. So everybody's familiar with this book. The only reason I mention it is because PCEF is going to be doing a lot of refrigerants, and in this book it tells you that choosing the proper refrigerant is the most important thing you can do if you want to save the planet. And this is because refrigerants can be up to 1,700 times worse than CO2 if it's allowed to enter the environment. Funny thing, if you're going to go to heat pumps, refrigerants are really important. For example, most heat pumps today rely on R22. That's the one that's so much worse than CO2. So during manufacturing of that material, assembly of the heat pump, maintenance of the heat pump in the field, these are all very, very risky activities. So rather than use up a whole lot of time, I'd just like to suggest for PCEF that you should have rules on which materials are allowed and not allowed on your projects. And R22 should be one of the prohibited refrigerants. And I can't come to you with a bunch of problems with no solutions. So currently, R104A is a good one. And in the future, R32 is going to be a preferred refrigerant. So you really need to have some rules for your contractors, and they can actually contribute to the preferred list because it's their business. They know what's good. They know what's bad. They want to save the planet like everybody else. Just make sure we don't buy the wrong materials that will actually nullify your goals, because you're here to save the place, and we have a 1% surtax on big business. We want to make sure that we accomplish the goals effectively for that investment. And for a lot of people who've done energy retrofits, a lot of times they come up short because of little nitpicking mistakes in the project that after it's done, it's too costly to fix, and you have regrets. So this is a very tricky business you're in. I'm here to help. Thanks for listening.
Thank you. Andrea Johnson?
Hello, my name is Andrea Johnson. I'm currently the Executive Director of Green Empowerment, and a lot of people have asked why I'm so interested in serving on the grant committee. So Green Empowerment works internationally on renewable energy, clean water projects, and specifically with developing capacity with local organizations to do that work. My background, though, my professional career has been in the Portland energy sector, and I've had a lot of opportunities to participate in programs such as the Cully Weatherization 2.0 program and the Moderate Income Savings Program with Energy Trust of Oregon. I was one of the designers behind that, and I saw a lot of opportunity but a lot of challenges, and I would love to bring that perspective to the granting committee. There's a lot of resources that exist, and I think you all have a great opportunity to map this fund to those existing resources while addressing a lot of the equity and environmental issues. So it's really exciting. I've been very impressed by the process, and I'm happy to be considered. So look forward to hearing more. Thanks.
Thank you, Andrea. Howard Shapiro?
Good evening. I'd like to address a concern that I have from some.
Oh, you're
excuse
okay.
me. I'm okay.
Scooch a little closer. Yeah.
A concern that I have that I'm sure you're aware of, but many of our people, homeless and so on, are concerned that some of the merchants in our area have shot the gun before this program. You were even chosen. They were charging a 1% surcharge on a lot of their goods that, you know, qualified for this thing. But I just don't think that's fair to everybody. You know, 1% isn't much for me and a lot of us, but for some of my friends it is. And this thing hasn't even gotten off the ground. You haven't set the ground rules and so on yet. And here they're charged, they're enriching themselves by a little bit, but it's just the idea of what they're doing. It's something I think that you should be aware of and think about how to prevent something like this from happening. I mean, if they were, when they're charged that amount, yeah, but when they have a better idea what they're going to be faced in paying their fees, then start working on it, but, you know, not before it happens. And you guys got your work cut out for you, and you're doing a great job, and I'm really happy this thing is almost off the ground because it's very important. And thank you very much for what you're doing.
All right. Thank you, Howard. If I could ask Sam to come back up. Just for the rest of the conversation. I lost you behind me there.
Thank you.
So if we could move to slide 7 for those on the phone, and then we'll go back to slide 6. So just one more. I just wanted for a reminder for the committee members and also for the members of the public who may be newer to this process that the initiative, the ballot initiative, did identify areas of expertise and lived experience that were required to make sort of as part of the committee composition, and that what that was part of the deliberation when folks were considering the appointment of the 5 current committee members, and it is part of the deliberation that the current committee members are kind of going through and we'll be talking about today. So just a reminder that the visual on slide 7, I think most of the folks in the room have seen it, lays out each of the areas of expertise and experience that we want to have on the committee. The areas that we are still seeking to fill in are a member with expertise in residential efficiency and renewable energy, a member who can represent the minority and women contracting community, and then we need one more member of the committee who lives east of 82nd Street. So in the application material that you all received from the original list that was advanced from the Selection Advisory Committee, and then the additional solicitation that BPS did in September, you should see that we do have two applicants who live east of 82nd, and certainly a pool that we should be able to fill the holes that are still needed. These nominees will be recommended for appointment by City Council, so it is worth also noting that in addition to the criteria in the initiative, City Council is seeking members who are and will remain free of conflicts of interest. I think that we should start just by giving committee members the opportunity to share some reflections about the guidance within the initiative around the composition of the committee, and then maybe talk a little bit about what attributes they're looking for and their review of the applicant pool so far. So I would open it up to the committee. Robin?
We're not nominating anybody yet. Just.
Pardon me?
You're not asking us to nominate anybody yet. Just kind of share our.
Just share some of your reflections sort of about the process in the applicant pool. We'll then be asking you to give us each individually sort of your top 4 pick.
Sure. I think first I want to just make a statement that I think deliberating about individuals in a public forum is delicate. And I just want everybody listening to understand that we're trying to treat everybody with respect. At least I'm speaking for myself, and I think I'm speaking for other board members. This is not, at least for me, not coming all that natural for me. So just appreciate any flexibility that the community has in understanding that this is not something that I typically, or we probably typically do on a day-to-day basis. That said, I think, for me, I looked at a couple key criterias in my review of the candidates. First and foremost was avoidance of conflict of interest. That was a high priority in my considerations. I also gave a little bit more higher weight to workforce development. That is a big piece of my understanding of what PCEF is all about. So I probably put a little bit more emphasis on workforce development, trying not to detract from some of the other needs of the committee. So I think those are probably the highest kind of general guidelines that I have, and that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Robin. Michael?
I'd just like to start out by saying that I thought our pool of applicants was really good, and I definitely had favorites going in, and then started pulling people for conflicts of interest. So that was probably the hardest part, was to look and find people that I thought really fit the missing parts and also complemented the board as it is right now, the committee as it is right now. But I found as we got rid of conflicts of interest that it became a more and more homogenous sort of who was left after those conflicts of interest. I did find that a little bit disappointing as I went through, trying to very intentionally continue to create a diverse board, and as pulling conflicts of interest out, that became sort of a harder and harder thing to achieve. And so that was my only concern, but yeah.
Shanice?
So I'll add, I do think as I'm reflecting on the candidates in this process that the spirit of the Portland Clean Energy Fund to do weatherization projects that impact low-income communities, you know, as in terms of the ballot initiative and my support for it. I'm really connecting, I think, with what this coalition may articulate as priorities and what's in the ballot language, and there definitely is a stellar pool of folks to consider and look through. And as we reflect on the conflict of interest piece, just to kind of expand for folks who aren't all caught up, there's definitely a space for us to think about folks who might be considering or engaging with the process in their own personal work, and that would be a conflict of interest for this space. So I guess we'll get into that conversation when we reflect more on the candidates. And yeah, I think having representation from folks who can speak to some of the requirements around living east of 82nd and residential energy and energy efficiency. I think those pieces and workforce development are what the committee still needs some more support with. And so, yeah, I look forward to hearing y'all's perspectives as we get into this conversation. And yeah, echoing Robin as well, that it's a public forum for a conversation that is kind of happening with people in the room, right? So we're definitely going to be respectful and thoughtful and try to be thinking about all of these pieces that we have to consider.
Anyone else? Oh, Maria.
I echo all the comments that everyone had said. As we scrutinize all the applications for conflict of interest, it became increasingly difficult to prioritize certain roles and identities. It was a real privilege to be able to look at these resumes. It was an enjoyable process for me to see everyone's expertise come out in such a brief application and CV form. But I know as we applied all the filters, or as I applied all the filters, you know, what you end up with to meet some of the criteria or the desired criteria, it became really hard to see some of the ideal or preferred candidates according to like the ballot measures stand out, or to what we've heard where the needs were as we move forward with the next four. You know, I started to question or wonder, you know, how important is it, for example, that we check off the box to fit certain identities or experiences? For example, you know, I know it's really important for us to continue to expand participation east of 82nd, but in lieu of having an address east of 82nd, how much more important could it be that we find people who are committed to serving those east of 82nd, especially as the filters came through. There might be just a thinner pool of people who might fit all those criteria. So it was challenging, and you know, I wonder, would we be able to deliberate today in real time and select somebody, or is this something that we could extend or discuss further? And I also, you know, saw that beyond who we pick today, I definitely see people engaging in this initiative beyond serving in a committee capacity, and I really am so excited about what other influential roles or bodies or subcommittees we could potentially engage with or form moving forward too. Thank you.
Thanks, Maria. Megan?
I feel like I should say something too, since everyone else did. I would echo what my fellow committee members said, but I just add a couple comments in that, in terms of the conflict of interest part, yes, indeed, you can see we all struggled with that a little bit, and I'll put a positive spin on it in that it seems like there'll be lots of people who submit really great applications to the fund coming up, so that makes me enthusiastic, and I look forward to seeing really thoughtful, competent, and inspiring applications from folks who just aren't going to be able to serve on the committee due to that reality. And while I think at the end our pool ended up not being huge, there were excellent people in it who I think fill the gaps we have for the most part. There may be places where we don't fill a diversity of backgrounds and identities or geographies, and I wonder if our committee can find other ways also to hear from folks that might not serve as a member of the 9-member committee, but where we might hear presentations or go on field trips or hear from folks. I'm thinking particularly Native American communities. If we don't end up with a member who can bring that perspective to our committee, I'm hopeful. That's just one example. I can say others, but that's one that comes to mind for me. And perhaps similarly with East of 82nd geography. So I hope that we're a little reflective about the perspectives we may not get totally in our 9 and find other ways to get those perspectives in this round. And then also the committee will change over time and bring on new people.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. So this is Sam Barrasso for the record. So I really appreciate all your comments, and I think I'll go out on a limb in saying this is that, as we've communicated in the past, and certainly in the City Council session on September 25th, our City Council communicated, we sort of state law is here, and you all are being asked to operate at this place here, and so it certainly was. I hear the challenge you all went through, and I know it's a challenge that certainly as we as staff have wrestled with how to assure that you all are able to have the right support. So, what I think I'm certainly hearing is around thinking around additional ways in which we can bring some additional feedback to you, additional perspective to you all, maybe in a different format. And what staff will do is this, as you all, assuming we may get to that place where you can nominate today, we can come back with a proposal of options just based on the makeup and getting a sense for where we can bring that additional feedback. Because what we'll say is this application period, with the exception of the select recruitment for the minority woman-owned contractor representation, it closed way back in June. So since that time, several others have expressed interest, and we certainly have. There's a recognition that U9, while are phenomenal, or U9 will be phenomenal with the rest of your cohort. There will be additional expertise, and we'll have to think through ways we can bring that. So that's something staff will certainly work on. In response to timeline, you will see soon here, and it won't be this meeting, but in our next subsequent meeting, we've got a really busy timeline, and it takes a bit to get these moving. So it's I'd say that there's certainly a lot of interest and eagerness in getting the 9 seated. I hopefully early November and getting the work moving because we've got a busy bit here if we're going to get some of these funds out in summer of 2020. So I'll stop there and just want to say thank you for that. Thank you for those initial comments.
All right. Well, are there any other comments from the committee? So at our last meeting, and this is Katie Lister for the folks on the phone, sorry. At our last meeting, the committee agreed to make decisions using a modified consensus model that staff had recommended. Using this model, any committee member can make a proposal to be discussed, tested, and potentially voted on. After the proposal has been discussed, for a while and it seems like the conversation is over, then I'll call for a test, and you as committee members will have 4 options. You can sort of indicate that you want to block the proposal and that you have a fundamental disagreement with it that has not been resolved in discussion and you want to look for a new proposal. You can stand aside, which means that you can't support the proposal, but you're willing to let it pass. You can express reservations, which basically indicates that you have some reservations, but that you're willing to let the proposal pass. Or you can indicate your agreement, which is that you support the proposal. Under the modified consensus model that we talked about, one committee member can actually express that they can sort of have a no vote or a block vote. But if the other 4 indicate that they are willing to have or that they want the proposal to pass, then it will pass. So it's not a full consensus model. One person can't stop it. So I just wanted to remind you all that that was the decision that you guys agreed to, or the sort of decision-making methodology that you all agreed to last meeting, and the one that we'll be using to kind of make the decision about the 4 nominees today. So I'd like to start, I think, just by asking each of the committee members, and we'll just maybe start on the Shanice side of the table and then move over to the Michael side of the table, to give your four top choices for nomination. And James is switching screens right now because he's going to be kind of filling in a table as we go. And hopefully folks on the phone will, if they are logged into the webinar, will be able to see this as well.
So I have a question, actually, and I realize that we're processing a little bit about conflict of interest, and I wanted to gauge if there was an update on any potential candidates that may not engage in the grant application process in order to be considered.
Sam?
I think, if I'm not mistaken, I'm assuming you're speaking of Lisa Watt.
Mm-hmm.
So what I do know is Lisa Watt, who's the Director of Indigenous Affairs at EcoTrust at the moment, will likely be applying for funds in collaboration or partnership with other organizations. So.
Okay. So starting off with me, I'm going to not necessarily follow the rules that you gave me. So, oops, sorry. For me, I have a real interest in kind of dialoguing a little bit before throwing out 4, but I can throw out 2. And reflecting on what we're talking about, the space of a need for minority contracting, representation or woman-owned, and someone that brings some residential energy or renewable experience. And I think there are a couple folks here that we have, and also who live east of 82nd, who just straight up have no conflicts of interest, and also have some really rich experience in those areas, and also connected to the work of the Clean Energy Initiative and its building up to even get here. So my 2 for now are Ron Feast and Faith. So I think that Faith, I'm going to just kind of refer to Faith Graham's application as I'm talking. But as I said, is kind of free of those conflicts of interest, and also has some rich experience with energy, water, health, and affordable buildings. And then we have Ron Feast, who's kind of have a spread of experiences that could be really, really beneficial to the community, from fundraising and program development, and has engaged in the work with the coalition in very direct ways. So also lives east of 82nd. So I think that for me feels natural, and maybe there's space for me to come back if I get to choose 2 more after hearing from other folks.
You're in charge. We just suggest the rules. Robin?
This is Robin, and I have 4 that I want to nominate. Renfis, Jeremy Hayes, Faith Graham, and Andrea Johnson. And I guess I'll just save any deliberation for later if we have to.
Megan?
I'll keep my comments brief to save for deliberation, but I also similarly found Ron Feast a compelling candidate for all the experiences mentioned. I also have Andrea Johnson on my list as somebody who brings a lot of experience in residential energy, finance, knowledge of existing incentive programs, and a global perspective that may be unique and certainly doesn't lend itself to a conflict of interest, so that's good. I also have on here, lots of debates here, Jeremy Hayes for experience in environmental justice, organizing, finance, workforce development, and then Jeffrey Moreland for bringing perspectives of minority contractor in a different field than residential energy, but may be able to bring workforce development. I did have a question about faith, and I guess I was wondering if there was a possible conflict of interest, but maybe I'm misreading the application.
Our understanding and based on our conversations is no. Faith Graham's work is it's running a national network, and it isn't. They don't have any intentions or haven't indicated any intentions around applying for funds, whether her or folks within her network.
Okay.
All right, here are my 4. I think the biggest piece with the conflict of interest thing is that we don't aid in people getting disqualified from participating in the grant, and I've seen it in that sense and analyzed it in that sense. I recommend Andrea Hamburg, Faith Graham, Jeremy Hayes, and Jeffrey Moreland for reasons that my peers have also said. And I know Andrea is the new one I'm throwing in there, Andrea Hamburg.
Did you catch those? Yeah. Okay. All right, Michael?
I'm sorry, one more time on.
Andrea Hamburg,
Yeah.
Faith Graham, Jeffrey Moreland, and who did I say here? And Jeremy Hayes.
Okay, now Michael.
Apologies in advance for any typos or misspellings in people's names as we're doing this live. We'll clean it up on the end of the notes.
Yeah.
This is Michael. I went through these pretty deeply and started pulling and reshuffling and pulling again. But I ended up with Ranfis and Jeffrey Moreland. I had Andrea Hamburg. And then Faith Graham.
Well, when we were imagining how this would go, we thought maybe there would be 2 that everyone picked. And so we were able to get those off of it. That does not appear to have happened. So, Shanice, after hearing everybody else's comments and selections, did you have anything that you wanted to add?
A couple of things are coming up. I am just wanting to clarify, and maybe it's us to kind of talk about what it might mean to not identify a applicant who lives east of 82nd. To my understanding, there were 2. And so that's a discussion around at least that one space that we know we need to consider tonight. And then I know we had some public comments, and the minority and woman-owned contract applications we got are definitely reflecting on this conflict of interest piece there too. So I'm definitely resonating with what recommendations my fellow committee members made, and just wanted maybe to provide some space to clarify that conflict of interest piece with Jeffrey. And if that's not a concern, then I think that it would be amazing in this space of thinking about other nominees. But yeah, I'm just sifting through that in terms of the list that we have and who could essentially be appointed by City Council after our recommendation, given some of those things.
So this is Sam Ross for the record. I'm just to answer Shanice your first question on the east of 82nd criteria. It is there's a whole range of criteria within the ballot language, which was then codified within the city code. And east of 82nd is one of those criteria. It is as it's in city code, and it isn't inherently something that the city isn't allowed to. There are certain other criteria that are in the city code that inherently you cannot uphold. That there's federal laws that preempt some of the other criteria. East of 82nd isn't one of those. And so, should you not have an individual here that you all can come to your agreement, to your modified consensus, we would likely have to go back out and find someone east of 82nd that would meet your criteria. So that's. At least that would be my understanding.
Maria?
Can you restate for the crowd which nominees satisfied the 82nd criteria so that they could follow along?
Randfeast, Viatoro lives east of 82nd, and then Nate McCoy also lives east of 82nd. Want to speak? And Shanice, did you have another? I thought I heard another question in what you said, and that was about a potential conflict of interest with Jeffrey Moreland. So, Sam, if you could speak to that.
So, in our discussions with Mr. Moreland, his family firm does essentially civil work in the road right of way. So this is excavation work, asphalt work. The expectation, based on just a cursory review of the work that they do, is that they would not be participating on projects funded by the Portland Clean Energy Fund.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Maria? Oh, sorry. Nope, Maria accidentally flipped her thing up. Mm-hmm. Does anybody else have any other comments or reflections or anything else they would like you guys to talk amongst yourselves? We'll just sit back and listen.
Well,
Robin?
that clarified something for me, and I would add Jeffrey as the third person.
Robin?
I didn't provide any commentary on my nominees, but let me take a moment to do so right now. I selected Randfeast because I serve on a committee, the Prosper Portland's Council for Economic and Racial Equity with him, and I found him very insightful when it comes to topics about workforce development. What he says and his contributions to that committee have been extremely valuable, and I think his expertise in workforce development would be a great addition to this work that we're doing. For Faith, one of I think a key thing that was part of my thought about Faith. Let me correct me if I'm wrong here. Hold on a second. I just want to make sure I'm talking about the right person. If I understand correctly, she has legal and attorney experiences, and from my experiences serving on various boards and committees, that skill set I think is something extremely valuable to have in part of the deliberations. I know that we have city attorneys at our disposal is not the right word, but they're available to us, right? But I think they're more representing the city and like conflict of interest type stuff, whereas we're going to be talking about contracts and obligations and requirements, and I think having a voice of an attorney in that conversation would be very helpful. In those conversations. For Jeremy, one of the things that dawned upon me as I was kind of reviewing the PCEF materials is that we're going to be granting out a lot of money, right? And if you look at some of the annual budgets or amounts that some of the major foundations in Portland and Oregon are offering, the amount that we're going to be, deciding upon is up there with major foundations like Oregon Community Foundation and Meyer Memorial Trust. And they have staffs of 15, 20, 30 people that go through the grant application process, meet with vendors, meet grant or nonprofits. There's a lot of work. And, here, not to diminish the role of the staff, but right now it's staff of 4. There's this, committee ultimately of 9 volunteers, right? We're all dedicated, but we're not volunteers nonetheless. And I think it's important to have someone with some grant experience. And I don't believe Jeremy has grant-making experience, but he has, from what I understand, a lot of provide a lot of valuable experience in the world of grant making and larger sums of grant making that I think would be invaluable for this committee. And then finally, Andrea, she's here, so I'm a little awkward speaking about her, but I just resonated with her application and on a personal level, and so that was a kind of motivation that it's kind of for me made check a lot of the check boxes that what PCEF is all about. So those are my thoughts.
Thank you. Any of the other committee members want to share thoughts about the reasons for your nominations? It's okay if not. Michael?
Am I allowed to say things that may seem inappropriate?
Technically. We're not the boss of you.
I'm going to throw out there that I would personally like to see this committee made up of a minority of men. That could be me because I work in a work group of 28 people, and we have 1 woman in the work group, and it's 26 white men. So I negotiate that every day. I'd rather not on this committee. And I would like to see as deep a representation of the communities that we are hopefully going to impact on the board as possible, or on the committee as possible. So I'm just going to end with that.
Thanks, Michael. Well, I would point out, I guess, since there are there's no other comments desired to be at this time, that the 3 folks who were nominated by 4 of you are Rand Feast, Faith Graham, and Jeffrey Moreland. And with those 3 nominees, you do have you would have committee members who are one who lives east of 82nd. You would be bringing residential efficiency and renewable expertise, and you would be bringing on someone who can represent the minority and women-owned contractor community. So I think just wanted to throw that out there, that 4 of you named those 3 individuals, and those are kind of the 3 boxes that we really needed to check in terms of the composition of the committee. And then there is an additional sort of spot to be filled that is now kind of free to be filled with whatever experience or expertise you all feel would best round out the group. Megan?
That's really helpful to hear, in my understanding then. So if I'm doing my bingo card correctly, I think that leaves just a few people for us to really debate or decide, deliberate maybe is a better word, among. And hearing Michael's consideration, if I'm reading into the names, I actually think that reduces the pool a little bit further. I'll just say a little bit more. I did look closely at the 2 Andreas up there. I think both were really outstanding candidates. I ended up myself suggesting Andrea Johnson because of particular expertise in energy incentive programs and in renewable energy programs and things like that, whereas Andrea Hamburg seemed to be more of a general climate public health planning scholar, which I do think we have a little bit represented on our committee. So I thought Andrea, that's just to try to share, I guess, it seems that we might be sort of discussing strengths of different candidates. So I just want to share a little bit more about my deliberation among those two people.
Shanice?
Yeah, and I guess as we continue this deliberation, I'm thinking about the coalition right now, and maybe as we can reflect on some of these core experiences that we want to see more of on the committee, in addition to what it means to actualize our commitment to racial equity, right? In this work and through this process, I think capacity building and other things that are ahead will definitely require us to lean on each other and be thought partners as we navigate the work with others in community. So I guess I would want to deliberate a little bit on how you might see the principles or core values in the of PCEF with these other folks we're considering. And I'm seeing Andrea Hamburg talk a little bit about anti-racist work, and that could definitely be reflective of this organizing generalist space that she occupies. And so I'm curious about what we have right now. What is the last nugget, if you will? Because as it stands, we don't have capacity to have representation from the Native and Indigenous community. And so that for me means as a committee member that actualizing a plan to get buy-in and partnership with those communities are important for me as we move along. So I'm rambling and not saying a whole lot, but I just wanted to throw out something for us to frame our deliberation.
Robin, did you still have a comment?
Not yet.
Okay. Maria?
Sure, I think I'm an easy one to convince when it comes to confirming who our representative is for east of 82nd. So that's one that I could shift. But I really hear Michael on being thoughtful about gender representation, and Shanice making sure that we put our equity work forward and we lead with race or work with people who want to lead with race as well. And, you know, I'm torn trying to think about how do we satisfy our requirements to complete this team with adequate Native American representation and do it in a way that's thoughtful and one that's free of conflict. So I'm going to lean on everybody else on how we get there, but that discussion is really valuable to me right now. So how much time y'all got? We're here.
Robin?
Yeah, I'm just going to throw out a proposal, and if no one agrees, that's fine. But if there is some consensus on, I think, what is currently Shanice's slate, Renfis, Faith, and Jeffrey, maybe we go ahead and have a vote on those three candidates, and then we can deliberate on the final. It gives us an opportunity to just kind of focus the conversation. But if people want to still have a broader discussion, I'm still open to that.
So, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, you absolutely. I don't see why not. You just did it. So, Robin's proposal is to kind of agree or see if there's consensus on Ranfis, Faith, and Jeffrey Moreland. And so what I'd like to do is just go around the table and then get from each of you if you agree with that proposal or if you want to block that proposal. Those are the sort of two bookends there. Or if you want to stand aside, which is an indication that you don't like the proposal but you're willing to let it pass, or slightly more in the affirmative, that you have reservations but that you're willing to let it pass. So can we start with Shanice?
I'm in agreement with the first three.
Robin agrees.
Megan, I agree.
Maria agrees.
Michael agrees.
Awesome. You guys just made your first decision.
Modified consensus.
Now we took off the gloves.
That's right. Now one more.
Just kidding.
Megan?
This is just a question. Sort of in dialogue with what I heard Shanice and Maria said, and something I brought up earlier is I think it would be great to have a Native American perspective on the committee. What we learned going through is we did not have a large pool of applicants, and then conflict of interest has made it impossible for us to select one. And I wonder, what did you say would be, what if we decided today, this is just a what if, that was really an important gap? Is that a possibility to search for?
So it certainly impacts timelines. It impacts timelines in terms of having a full slate of 9 being able to move on this work. I wouldn't, we certainly, after you 5 were appointed, we certainly did open up a recruitment for a minority contractor, and we opened that up for 2 weeks. It would be unlikely, we've got a placeholder on City Council agenda for November 7th where we could potentially bring this action forward. We would not likely be able to bring the full 9 forward on that timeline. And so I would say if you all cannot come to an agreement, there is a potential that we may be able to open up a separate recruitment afterwards. We have to confer with City Council, but that's certainly a possibility. What would happen then is that we would likely come with the first 3 in early November, pending approval from City Council, that we could do that, and then we would have this recruitment cycle happen. And my sense would be that it would, let's say we opened it up later end of this week, it would remain open for 2 weeks, and we'd have to bring you all together again to review those applications, and then have a public meeting. So I would be looking at middle of December before we could probably have a City Council appointment for that individual. So that would be the impact on a timeline perspective, and there's a certain amount of dialogue that we absolutely need to move forward with the body in order to make sure that we're ready to put out funds in the middle of summer. We would have to adjust. So there's a couple conversations that will need to happen with City Council to affirm that that's okay. But I think that there's a probable window in there for that too.
Any other committee members? Or Megan, did you have a follow-up?
Oh, I was just going to respond to that. There's obviously trade-offs to be made in every decision. We'd have no guarantee that we would necessarily find appropriate candidates. So clearly it's just a big interest to the language of the initiative and to work on environmental justice. So I would just strongly say, as I said earlier, that if we aren't able to fill that this round, which I think would be okay given our urgency and desire to move forward and the fact that there are other great candidates in the pool, that we just do due diligence and try to make sure we hear perspectives and relationship build in a way that we can feel informed as committee members on even though there might not be, yeah. Sorry, I'm trailing off here because I'm thinking out loud.
This is Sam Bross. What I'd offer is that certainly staff is committed to coming back with a proposal after today. We can certainly we'll work on a proposal around just evaluating both between those that you nominate here today as well as the skill sets you all bring, the gaps, and think about how do we bring that additional expertise and what does that look like, whether that is a technical advisory body, whether that is another body, and so that's certainly a commitment that staff have in terms of bringing that forward for you all as a proposal.
And then, sorry, to continue the conversation on the remaining candidates that have been already mentioned, I would appreciate hearing a little bit more, I guess, about the remaining ones, and maybe particularly an attempt to respond to the priorities mentioned.
So the remaining kind of candidates from this list that you all have selected are Jeremy Hayes, Andrea Johnson, and Andrea Hamburg. I'm not sure if there is, I don't have additional information beyond what was in their application material, but if there are specific questions, staff has had some conversations with them. We might be able to answer those, but we might not.
just could you highlight their names so I'm visual, so just I focus my attention on them. Just once is fine.
Those are the three.
Do any of the committee members have particularly strong feeling of support or concern going forward with one of these as the sort of fourth nominee in this slate?
Does anybody have any changes they'd like to make in theirs?
Robin?
Yeah, I just want to comment on something Michael mentioned, and I appreciate your thoughts that you shared earlier about having representation, and that's something that I, in my work, deal with every day, and I think this is meant to be kind of an inclusive opportunity, and I think that meant that for me, that implies inclusive of everybody in the community. And one of the things when I started doing this work, I went to some meetings at OWAMI, the Oregon Association of Minority Entrepreneurs, and one of the things that first caught my attention is kind of their slogan, and I'm not going to recite it right, but it's something along the lines of everybody's in, no one's out. And it's a very exclusive, if you're black, you're white, you're pink, you're brown, whatever it is, it's a very inclusive community and they're welcoming to all. And, I've kind of followed them a lot in that respect. That's a guiding, I can't think of the word right now, but that's something that I use in my day-to-day work in terms of guiding, my decisions about inclusivity. I hear you. I understand where you're coming from. I've certainly been in that same environment as well. But I also factor in, look at the existing committee members, look at the people that we've nominated, and I think, it is a very diverse list. So whoever ends up being nominating for, I think it's a pretty diverse board. So that's my comments on, thank you.
And I would also, I would say that I love inclusivity, but I also have a very strong affinity for empowerment, and especially for empowerment of communities that have for 400 years been kept out of power. And so inclusivity is really important. But I think that for me personally, empowerment is even more important.
Does anyone have a proposal?
Does anybody want to change?
Wow, Shanice, you have a gap.
Yeah, I know. It's all on you, Shanice.
So I guess I'm not on either side. So I'm grappling with what that means for how I need to show up. And this is really a fascinating process. There is this space, right, of reflecting on the impacts of our work if we can't get to this decision today. And I'm not really sure what that even looks like. We grappled with, okay, these are some of the next steps. But having a full committee by the next time we meet, I think is part of the goal. And also, what does it mean to reflect on these processes as we're navigating them to be to actually do the work that it was intended to do? And I don't know, I guess, the answer to these big questions, but my initial thought, I guess, right now is I'm thinking, or I'm resonating with, you know, if making a decision today is in our best interests, that we definitely have, we reflected on the stellar pool of folks, and it's just negotiating the needs that we know aren't being asked of us. But Andrea Hamburg, I think, as I'm reflecting on, we have what we call generalists on the committee already, but I think having another thought partner to mobilize some of the, or actualize some of the intention of the Clean Energy Fund through the process, through their work with grant management, training, development, project management. I think those things would be supportive in the processes that we're going to be navigating. And I think there is an element of connection with some of the coalition, but like a lot of our applicants, right? So it's hard to get into this conversation because a lot of those things show up for many of these folks. So there's that. I think I'm leaning there, but my initial feeling is that if there was space to meet some of this need, especially representation from the Native and Indigenous community, I think that's pretty much really, really important for me, one of the top priorities, especially if we're able to kind of address some of the other missing pieces with the other candidates. But here, that's my 2 cents, and hopefully someone else can help pass the baton towards the finish line.
So are you nominating Andrea Hamburg?
Yes.
So if that is a proposal that is being put on the table, and I just wanted to make sure that there wasn't a question in there about going out, and because I did think I heard a little bit of that, just about what that would look like if we went out for another solicitation. Sam, would you take another quick stab at that?
So if we were to go out for another solicitation, we would likely confer with our city. We would connect with our city attorneys just to make sure we had the solicitation right, since obviously we'd be. It sounds like what I'm hearing is we're looking for potentially a perspective rooted in experience working with the Native American community. We would that would go out at that would go out earliest Friday of this week. Latest would be probably early next week, and so that would get us to. Let's see. So assuming we're on that timeline, we would likely keep applications open through through November 11th. We would then bring you all back. My sense is probably the week before Thanksgiving in order to have a deliberate. We would provide all those materials based on your direction today. Right after that, we would then bring you all back middle of November, probably the week before Thanksgiving, in order to deliberate on those applications, assuming we have a robust pool of applications to deliberate on. And then, assuming we had a decision, we would then bring that person forward for city council appointment in early December. So this individual would inevitably we would bring on the first 3 in early November, I think, just to keep as we've discussed, in order to keep the ball moving in terms of the deliberations you all. So this person would be about a month or so, depending on when we can get on city council's calendar, a month or so behind. So that would be how that would work out. And that's obviously it's you have I mean, what I will add is that's we would work with our partners to make sure we get the word out about that recruitment. But that would be the process.
Any additional comments or questions about that? Megan?
Would the existing pool we have, let's say where there were no applicants, would we just refer back to this existing pool, or would they be merged?
Yes. You have this pool, so you've already evaluated this pool. So certainly at that time, you'd still, assuming that those applicants were open to being considered, you would still have access to this existing pool. It certainly has implications on how the decisions are made, and obviously there's power dynamics in terms of when someone comes on. But yes, you would have access to this existing pool.
Anyone else? Robin?
You had mentioned earlier about how the PCEF staff can advise or help form advisory groups to help provide input from voices that may not be on the committee. Can you elaborate on that and how viable that option is, or what maybe some initial ideas that you might have along those lines?
So this is Sam Ross. So certainly when we've talked about this before, prior to you all getting seated, there's always a recognition that, especially as we were getting better feedback from City Council around their perspectives around conflict of interest and sort of the thresholds they wanted to bring to this, there's a recognition that some of those that were going to apply to grants weren't going to be able to be on this body. However, their perspective is incredibly valuable. And so that is, there are those that do that fully expect to deliver this work and can bring that sort of feedback in terms of what works, what doesn't work. So we haven't fully figured that exactly out, but there was an expectation that there would be sort of an extra technical advisory body. We were just going to wait till you all got seated in order to think through those gaps and figure out exactly what does that composition look like. In terms of sort of the feasibility of it, it's finding exactly what's the right touch in terms of how they need to engage with you on what are. It's defining what are the gaps that you all have, and then and how they're going to be meeting those needs. And so I think there's still a lot of room to define and design that at the same end, and that'll be balanced with staff capacity to manage another body. So I think that's something that we can certainly do, and as you all make your decisions today, we'll be probably better positioned to come back with a proposal, and I would say probably in mid-November, early December.
And this is James Valdez from BPS, and I would just note that there is good precedent within at least the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability in creating advisory committees for specific needs or projects that are happening in the community, and to get community input. And so there is kind of an existing structure we could probably look for, but we would have to really work on that as a staff and put together a proposal for your reflection.
Maria?
Sure. This process really highlighted for us how challenging it was to make recommendations with that criteria. I know that in this entire process, there were people who had to exit the process once they might have learned that their ability or qualifications to be able to apply for future funding would be challenged by their participation here, and that's something that they would have readily given up. So I think that I'm super interested in figuring out what other ways people can influence this process and still be eligible for funding and have some way to participate without giving up those privileges of being able to apply for funding that their communities or organizations clearly need. So I'm interested in exploring with you all what that could look like, and how do we keep people close in this process so that they could still be part of it while not having to potentially take on this exact role.
All right, well, sorry, go ahead, Shanice.
I'll just add, if there's a sense of consensus brewing, I think I'm definitely down to ride the wave. I think just as my space, reflecting as a Black woman on this body, I know my advocacy and my lived experience will shape how I show up, but it's I think not how we show up in this space individually, I think isn't going to speak to the capacity we still need to build with Black community, with Indigenous community. So I see it as a both and not an either or, and I think that the power and space that we hold here looks really different than other committees, as we're hearing a lot, and I think that there's value into leaning into these values that we're trying to live. So my personal feeling is that if folks are there, I think a month after the formal appointments would kind of happen generally feels okay. And if that could provide space to acknowledge what the coalition has kind of articulated as important, that for me is, I think, how I would operate professionally, but I also want to respect the process and respect the shared agreements that we create and recognize that there are other pathways and ways to build relationship and intention. But yes, there's definitely, I think, this space of capacity building that I think is a both and not, it doesn't, I think, make up for what the impact could truly be for communities, right? To be empowered and be really reflected in this process and the goal.
Thanks, Shanice. Any response or comments? It does feel a little funny to have have a proposal from Shanice, who is also clearly indicating that she's willing to do that, to ride the wave. Does anyone who would be perhaps a stronger advocate for a proposal have one to offer? Robin?
I'm kind of going back and forth between a couple candidates right now in my head, but I think it would be much more flexible for me if whichever candidate that we end up proposing, we also propose some request, a formal request, to, in the near future, address how other voices can be kind of shared, with this committee. It sounds like it can be done. I think, I guess, a more formal request, along with whatever individual we end up nominating. Does that make sense? I think there should be a more systematic way. There definitely should be a more systematic way to get voices that are not on this committee to be represented. And so I'd like to propose that whatever name we nominate that as well.
Maria?
Yeah, I'm considering us filling that fourth blank and leaving it up to council to help us out with the next step if they think that our process was adequate, or if they too would like to potentially fight for us to continue to open that search. Because I know that that's the next step, and whatever we recommend is still not final.
Mm-hmm. So let me hear that. Can you repeat that, Maria, clearly?
That we work tonight to nominate a fourth to the best of our ability, and we clearly propose to council, the kind of help we need from them, and for them to deliberate with some of the challenges that we had in mind. And if they strongly feel like we need to rethink this, fourth spot, and to continue seeking out that criteria more intentionally, or to reopen the process, then we can go back to the drawing board and figure that out. But I'd also like to see if they have anything to offer as we give these recommendations, and that they move either to confirm or to put that work back on us.
Thank you.
I'm in agreement.
That was Shanice.
So
she's riding the wave.
Megan, and I just want to, do a little bit of a time check. It's 7:22. I think that we probably are going to, June, if it's okay, push the outreach and engagement update until the next meeting. But I just wanted to do a time check for everybody and let you all know that it was 7:22. I think that I heard a proposal, or what sounded like the beginning of a proposal. from Maria. Sam?
What I heard from Maria is to nominate a fourth individual, but request that council evaluate that nomination in light of the absence of a Native perspective, and to see whether they're interested in delaying the timeline and soliciting that Native perspective. That's what I heard.
Yes.
And coming with Robin's other our proposals are beyond the committee member, the other proposal to have other ways of getting engagement. But just I'll just make an observation that in our fourth column there are 3 people in support of Andrea Hamburg, and so that seems to be a logical place to make a proposal around. And having reviewed, I really feel strongly that the remaining candidates would all be really great. They won't fill every perspective, so that is a gap. And I feel okay that if we actively try a couple different avenues to make sure we try to fill gaps, I would be ready to vote, and I'm just proposing Andrea Hamburg because the most numbers up there.
So
is that clear?
I think that is clear. James just wanted to note that Jeremy Hayes also does have 3.
Oh, thank you.
But does that change your statement?
I don't think it changes my proposal, though.
So if I could suggest that if we could combine a couple of proposals, and one of you could offer up Andrea Hamburg, and with a specific request to City Council, like sort of with noting when you give this slate of 4 to City Council that you are acknowledging the absence of an Indigenous person at the decision-making table, and that you would like their guidance and assistance in sort of redressing that. Also, that staff will work to put together some sort of a more formalized structure and plan to present to you to make sure that you have access to any number of different voices that may not be at the table.
I think you summed it up.
Okay, so that's really 3 proposals squished into one. So, Shanice, did you have something to add?
Oh, were you looking for somebody to kick it off?
Yeah, do it.
All right. So, yes, nominating Andrea Hamburg with space to have City Council support us in thinking about this Indigenous voice or space that is requested from community, and how we might think about that with this nomination slate. And also building capacity for voices in our community to be a part of the process who might not be reflective of skills or lived experiences that are in this current committee here, or in that slate we're proposing there. Did that capture all of the things?
I think so.
May I add our acknowledgement that we have not filled a voice of Indigenous communities on our table.
So with that addition, we'll just call it an addition, not an amendment, because I think it was in the original intent. Maybe you proposed it, so we will assume you agree.
Yes.
Robin?
I agree.
Megan?
Yes.
Maria?
Agreed.
Michael?
Agree.
All right. Good job, guys. Okay, well, given that we are at the end of our time, I'm going to apologize to June, but also now she's very prepared for the next meeting to give this presentation and congratulate kind of you all on making this decision and being so thoughtful in your deliberation. And is there anything else we need to do before we wrap up? Does anybody have any kind of final closing comments?
Just to understand, this slate and the various proposals will all be presented to the City Council, and then they'll vote on whether...
So
that's correct.
Yep, that's right. We've got an early placeholder on the November 7th City Council agenda, so I'll follow up this week with City Council, the mayor's staff, and checking in to see how we run that process. So I think that's exact anticipation, and we will draft up our documents, our City Council documents supporting this nomination. Okay.
All right. Well, thank you all.
Thank you.
And thanks to the members of the public for coming. Have a good night.